Hey, movie lovers, welcome to the Does It Hold Up News. I'm Adam, and we're going to be talking about a couple things happening in the world of film and television, but as always, we're going to start with that box office from this past weekend. The Nun 2 had a very good opening weekend, about where people expected it, but that's pretty good for a horror movie. It brought in $32,603,336, putting it in first place for the weekend. In second place was The Equalizer 3, with a 65% drop, still took in just over $12 million in its second week. In third place was another new release, My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3, taking in just over $10 million. In fourth place, another new movie to this chart, and one of the highest opening weekends for a Hindi language or Indian film in the domestic market, is Jawan, taking in $6.1 million. And what's crazy about that one is it's still technically in limited release, only playing in 813 theaters. Wide release doesn't start until it hits over that 1,000 theater mark. So making that much money in limited release, I can only expect how much it's going to bring in once it hits that wide release. In fifth place is Barbie with a 44% drop, but still took in $5.7 million in its eighth week. It has now made $620.2 million domestically. Absolutely amazing for a movie about a toy from Mattel. Never saw it coming. I don't think anybody else did either. In sixth place is Blue Beetle with a 46% drop, $3.8 million in its fourth week. It has taken in just under $64 million domestically, which is a big failure for DC. But not as big as I probably thought they were going to get out of this one, or even they thought they were going to get out of this one. I don't see it hitting that $100 million mark, but this is one of their lowest budgeted superhero movies. So I expect with all the extras, the add-ins, the product placements, the toy line, everything, they're going to make money on this movie. In seventh place is Gran Turismo, based on a true story, with a 47% drop, taking in $3.5 million in its third week. It's now grossed only $35.8 million domestically. I'm pretty sure we can consider this movie a flop. After 3 weeks, we kind of already know where the audience sits on this one, especially after its 2 weeks of special screenings, hoping the audience would get behind this movie, but clearly that didn't happen. I'm going to chalk this one up and say failure. In eighth place is Oppenheimer, dropping to its lowest point on this chart since its release, with a 46% drop, taking in just over $3 million in its eighth week. But this movie has made $315.2 million, far and away higher than I think anybody expected. A 3-hour biopic shot half in black and white by Christopher Nolan was ever going to make at the domestic box office. It's also at about $890 million worldwide, just under that $900 million. I believe it has another $110 million worldwide in it, and it might be a billion-dollar grosser. In ninth place is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, with a 40% drop, taking in just under $2.8 million in its sixth week. It is now at $111 million worldwide, which is just fantastic for that movie. This is why it's getting a 2-season TV show that's following up the events of this movie, and why the sequel's already been greenlit. The budget was relatively low on this movie, so it's going to return a nice hefty profit. And in 10th place is Bottoms. In its third week, it has a 33% drop, taking in just over $2 million. And right now, it's taken in $7.6 million overall at the domestic box office. But I also think it might have hit its limit on what it's going to do in the box office. But I do believe whoever scooped this one up, whether it be Netflix or Max or Paramount, Peacock, whatever streaming service gets this one, I expect it's going to be a big viewer for them, as people tend to watch a lot of comedies at home. 3 movies dropped out of the top 10 this week. Meg 2, The Trench, after just 5 weeks. Strays, after just 3 weeks. And Talk to Me, after an impressive 6 weeks, for a horror movie that nobody saw coming. And Talk to Me is also available now for paid video on demand, so if you didn't check it out in theaters and you like watching movies at home, you can actually go buy this movie, I believe it's $19.99, and watch it in the comfort of your own home. All right, let's get to some movie news that's happening. Do you guys remember MoviePass? It was a company that existed a couple years ago where you paid a monthly fee to see an unlimited amount of movies, one per day, each month. And it was some low price, like $10 a month only. I know I had it. I took massive advantage of MoviePass when it existed. I was seeing 5 or 6 movies a week for just $10 a month. In fact, they were like the first, if not one of the first, movie subscription things that you paid a monthly fee to be able to see movies. Now, they let you go to any theater, anytime. You just loaded a debit card with money, slid it like any other credit card, and boom, there you go. You had your ticket. You were ready to go. It was a crazy deal. But MoviePass eventually shut down because they were losing money left and right as people were only paying $10 but getting $100 worth of movies. Financially and business sense, it didn't work. So the company shut down. MoviePass got into a bunch of lawsuits about data breaches and all this stuff and disappeared. But it's back. MoviePass has now relaunched after claiming they were going to do so about a year and a half ago. People kind of laughed at that idea. What is this MoviePass thing? Why are you coming back? Nobody cares. Nobody wants it. But they are back. And they're doing exactly the same thing. Monthly subscriptions for a certain amount of movies. This time, though, they've changed it. It's not unlimited movies like it used to be. It's a limited amount of movies per month. So they currently have 4 tiers while they're in their beta testing. And the first tier is for $10 a month. You can get up to 3 movies per month. Now, that's not a bad deal. If you live in a market like I do, the average movie ticket's about $11.50 to $12. So if I can see 3 movies in a month for only $10, that's a pretty good deal. The second tier is $20, can get you up to 7 movies. $30 can get you up to 11 movies. And for $40 a month, you can get 1 movie a day, 30 movies a month. Unless you live in Southern California or Metro New York City, because then the price is doubled. But here's the catch. You actually don't get movies for that amount. You get credits. You get 34 credits or 46 credits, however many credits per tier. Then you spend those credits to get movie tickets. But the problem is, movie tickets will cost more credits based on areas you live. So right outside Chicago or in Chicago, that 34 credits you get for $10 might actually only get you 2 movies, not the 3, which is why they say you can get up to 3 movies, because you might not actually be able to get that. In fact, in Chicago, you don't know. A movie could cost you 20 credits because it's also based on the time of day you want to go, the day of the week, and if the movie is a new release or not. So if you're spending $10 and you're seeing that one movie for 20 credits, well, now you have 14 credits that you can't use for another movie because it's not enough. So it's an interesting way that they're going to do this. The one way that they're getting around that is your credits can roll over month to month, but only up to 2 months. So if you have the base plan of 34 credits, you can only ever carry in your account 68 credits at a time. Unbelievable. I don't know how they're going to get away with this. I don't know who's going to sign up for this. Actually, that's a lie. I do know a couple people that would probably sign up for this. But at the same time, a lot of theaters have their own subscription bases now. Like, I'm part of AMC A-List. For $23 a month, I get 3 movies a week. That's 12 movies a month. And I can see it in any format, any time of day, new releases, doesn't matter. It's all covered. Here, it's only at select theaters. They say there's 4,000 theaters nationwide, but I don't know what theaters that covers. And you can only see the 2D format. There's no 3D, IMAX, Dolby. None of those premium format screens are going to be covered by MoviePass. But every theater who offers their own subscription base allows those movies to be seen. So I'm not sure if MoviePass is going to survive, but it is interesting to see them back in action. I'm very curious. I might sign up just for 1 month, just to check it out. I want to see what theaters are available, what offers they have, and to see how many credits it actually takes to see a movie in my local market. Stay tuned to the channel. Check back in week on week as I do these newses every single Wednesday, because I'm going to sign up for MoviePass, and I'll fill you guys in on how it all worked out once I have more info. Up next, I want to talk about Martin Scorsese. So he has a new movie coming out October 20th called Killers of the Flower Moon, and It looks very interesting. It's a kind of a departure for Scorsese films. He's not one that's known for a big diversity inside of his cast. He usually focuses on Italian whites, Irish whites. That's something that he even notices about his own movies, because in a recent interview he was doing, he actually said this about his new movie. Quote, "After a certain point, I realized I was making a movie about all the white guys, meaning I was taking the approach from the outside in, which concerned me. If you guys don't know, the Killers of the Flower Moon movie is based off of a book back in 2017 called Killers of the Flower Moon, The Osage Murders. It's based on a true story of the Osage Indians and a bunch of murders that took place in there from outside white people coming to their land back in the 1920s. So the book focuses more on Tom White, who was the lead investigator of the FBI coming to check out these murders. That was the part Leonardo DiCaprio was originally going to play in the film. But Scorsese and his co-writer decided they didn't want to tell just another typical white guy story and see it from their perspective because, like he said, it's looking from the outside in. So they actually rewrote the entire script to see it more from the viewpoint of the Osage people. Leonardo DiCaprio stepped aside and became Ernest Buckhart, who is a morally gray man, but he's married to an Osage woman. And this is where the story is going to focus on their marriage in the midst of everything that's going on. Jesse Plemons then stepped in to take over the role of Tom White, who has now become a supporting character in this newest script. It's a very interesting thing that happened because Scorsese is a very respected man in the film industry. He's been making films for decades. He's an Oscar winner. He's made some of the greatest movies of all time. So for him to look at his own career, look at his own movie, and have that realization that maybe it's time to make just even the slightest of changes, it might bode well for a lot of diversity happening in future movies, because if somebody at Scorsese's level wants to make that change, you can expect it to trickle down to some of the smaller directors. I applaud him for this. So if you're interested in this movie, Killers of the Flower Moon, it comes out October 20th, 2023. It stars Jesse Plemons, Leonardo DiCaprio, and current Oscar winner Brendan Fraser. Up next, I want to talk about the WGA strikes, because nothing is happening with them, but there is a new wrinkle in the strike that's going on. So they're both, the WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes are holding very well right now. There's a lot of support from communities. There's a lot of support from the union members. It doesn't look like they're going to break anytime soon, which is crazy because the WGA is currently in its 4th month of a strike, catching up very quickly to becoming the longest strike in the history of the union. And now they have something new to be upset about. So a report came out that a lot of showrunners and writers for sitcoms and scripted television shows got their residual payments for 3rd quarter, but they were either really delayed or came in substantially smaller than the writer was expecting. So if you don't know what residuals are, those are continuing payments to creators of shows and movies that are specifically made for television and or for streaming. These are checks that come in every quarter based on a bunch of metrics like the amount of runtime, ad revenue, which episodes were replayed, things like that. A lot of people rely on these residuals. If you get a good show like Law & Order, which has been running consistently for decades in rerun, those residual checks can actually be pretty profitable. And a lot of people rely on them to, live and pay their bills. So when they came in really delayed or significantly smaller, people took notice. And there started to be a lot of tweets and a lot of conversation about, is it just me, or do you guys feel like these residuals might not be what they're supposed to be? A bunch of complaints came into the East Coast wing of the WGA union, and at first it seemed like it was just a small pocket of people, but more and more complaints came in. Eventually it worked its way to the West Coast, where they were seeing the same kind of thing come in, and now they're kind of looking into it, because the studios, like Comcast and Universal, are saying they didn't delay any of the payments. They sent the money out to third-party companies who are the ones who actually write the checks for the residuals. But if they didn't delay the payment, but the payments are delayed. What's going on here? And this comes at a really poor time because they're in the midst of a strike. And one of the talking points of the strike is the fact that residuals are already too low for the amount of streaming and reruns that are happening with a lot of these shows. One of the major points of this is they want higher residuals. But now all of a sudden in the third quarter, at the height of the strike, the residuals are coming in late or significantly smaller than expected. Something seems a little fishy here, and I know the studios are blaming these third parties, but I feel like the studios got to take a little bit of blame here. Hopefully, this is actually just a minor oversight of everything that's happening in the third quarter, and they can get back to normal, because if they don't get back to normal moving forward with the way the residuals come in, the strike is just going to last longer, and the companies are going to lose any sort of momentum that they have in this strike, if they even have any, because right now, they don't. And in fact, they're losing momentum when stories like this come out. So I'm going to keep following this one and see if those residual checks ever come back to normal, or if there's any new information released, if one of these third-party companies like Entertainment Partners in California is going to accept blame and say, oh, that's our fault. We didn't send the checks out on time. Interesting to follow along. As always, we're going to end with what's coming this weekend. So we have 3 movies coming out this weekend I wanted to talk about. The first is A Haunting in Venice. This is Kenneth Branagh returning as Hercule Poirot in his 3rd outing after Murder on the Orient Express and Death on the Nile. This time, he has to solve a murder that involves ghosts? Maybe. He's going to figure it out. It's a little bit of a horror movie mixed with a murder mystery, and I'm actually really excited for it. I liked Murder on the Orient Express. I did not like Death on the Nile, but I am a fan of the character Hercule Poirot. I'm always down for a good murder mystery, especially when the detective in charge is a very interesting case study of human nature, which is exactly what these are. I'm going to check this one out. I actually have tickets for tomorrow to see this, so I can get a review up for it over the weekend and let you guys know if it's worth seeing. The movie is also starring Tina Fey, Jamie Dornan, and recent Oscar winner Michelle Yeoh. Up next is another movie opening up this weekend in theaters called A Million Miles Away. This is a small movie about the true story of Jose Hernandez, a migrant farmer who dreams of becoming a NASA astronaut one day, and, surprise, surprise, he eventually gets accepted into the program. I don't know how I feel about this one. It feels very cliche. It feels like 1,000 other true story movies that we've watched, but it does have one thing going for it that makes me very interested in seeing it. Besides the fact that I'm just a huge fan of space, it has Michael Pena as the star of the movie, playing Jose Hernandez. I love Michael Pena. I think he's a very underrated actor who never gets a chance to really shine as the lead of a movie, so it might be worth watching just to see him as a star. It comes out in theaters this Friday. The last movie to come out this Friday in theaters, but in limited release, it gets a wide release on September 29th, is Dumb Money. Another true story about the craze of GameStop stock during the height of the pandemic, and the fact that a bunch of Wall Street billionaires tried to stop the average person from making any money with GameStop. You guys all know GameStop, right? It's the video game store that really only exists in malls and almost shut its doors back in 2019 and 2020 before regular players like you and me started buying the stock and putting money back into the company, which allowed them to get through the pandemic and almost turn a really good profit for them for the first time in many years. This is the true story of how that all happened. I'm interested in this, only somewhat. I think it's a little too soon for this movie. I think the story needed to kind of just sit a little longer before they rushed into a Hollywood big production of this movie. But more than anything, I'm kind of just kicking myself that I didn't jump on the GameStop stock train when it was up and running during everything. You know, we all could have made a little bit of a pretty penny on this, and kind of disappointed I didn't join in. This movie stars a whole bunch of people. Paul Dano, Pete Davidson, Vincent D'Onofrio, America Ferrera, Nick Offerman, Anthony Ramos, Seth Rogen, and Shailene Woodley, among many, many others. It's going to be a crazy movie. I don't know how true it is to the actual story. Can't wait to see the movie so that I can compare it to the actual story. But it's going to be nice counterbalancing to A Haunting in Venice and The Nun and other horror movies that are coming out now. All right, that's it. Let me know in the comments if you're going to see any of those movies this weekend, or if there's any other movies that you're super excited coming out that I didn't touch upon. What do you think about some of the stories? What do you think about those residuals, or the fact that Martin Scorsese rewrote his entire script to include diversity? All interesting stories. You can check back in next week as I'll be back with another update on what's going on in the world of film and television. Until next time, just remember that you're a legend, so be good to yourself, but more importantly, be kind to others. And, as always, keep watching movies.